UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good evening, welcome to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, the show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority. On tonight's show, a Palestinian family has been granted residency through a scheme meant for Ukrainians after a judge has overruled the government. Meanwhile, Britain continues to send billions in foreign aid while cutting services at home. Is it time Britain took a leaf out of America's new book? Is Rachel Reeves' career on the line? The OBR has slashed growth forecasts, wiping out her £9.9 billion of fiscal headroom. GDP is shrinking, borrowing costs are up, and Labour's £40 billion tax raid is backfiring. With her ironclad fiscal rules at risk, will she raise taxes, slash spending, or be forced to resign? Now, as Nigel Farage's Reform UK surges once again in the polls, Keir Starmer and the Labour government are scrambling to win back voters by apparently mimicking Reform's hardline stance on immigration. I'll be asking my top panel, is it too late? And Gen Z is drinking less than any generation before them. 1 in 5 don't drink at all, believe that? And binge drinking is on the decline, despite them pushing for a new approach to our drug policy. What on earth is going on? That State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, columnist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/your say and hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But now it's time for the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Matt, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories. US President Donald Trump has spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin today about ending the war in Ukraine. Trump saying that call went very well. Mr. Trump said in a post on his social media platform, "We've also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately." Putin last spoke to a sitting US president in February 2022 when he had a call with Joe Biden shortly before ordering thousands of troops into Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has also spoken to the US president. They reportedly discussed opportunities to achieve peace and also the preparation of a document governing security and economic cooperation.
to the president, to his message that he will support Ukraine and he really wants to stop this war. And I know that he's a strong man, and I'm sure that he will push Putin.
In other news, a review into the handling of the man who murdered Sir David Amess under the counter-terror programme PREVENT has found his assessments were problematic. Ali Harbi Ali, who was given a whole life sentence in 2022, had been referred to PREVENT 7 years before he killed the veteran MP in October 2021, but his case was closed in 2016. The review found the handling of his PREVENT case was suboptimal and that it was closed too quickly. The government promised to publish the PREVENT Learning Review after the report into Southport killer Axel Rudakabana's handling by the programme was published last week. And Sir Keir Starmer and the leader of the opposition clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions earlier today. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch repeatedly asked the Prime Minister why a Gazan family of 6 was allowed to come to the UK under a scheme intended for Ukrainians, and if that loophole would be closed.
There are millions of people all around the world in terrible situations. We cannot help them all, and we certainly cannot bring them all here. Will he commit to bringing forward that new legislation or amending his borders bill?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got a team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, it's over to Matt Goodwin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, here's my question tonight. Hasn't Britain done enough? A Palestinian family has been allowed to settle here after a judge overruled the Home Office. They apply through a scheme meant for Ukrainians, and despite the government rejecting their case, the court ruled in their favour on, get this, human rights grounds. A judge ruled that rejecting their application would breach human rights law, even though they weren't eligible under the scheme's actual rules. The Home Office has warned that this could set a dangerous precedent, potentially opening the floodgates for more cases like this. Now, this is not an isolated incident. Immigration tribunals have made other controversial rulings, including blocking the deportation of an Albanian criminal because his son refused to eat foreign chicken nuggets. I'm not joking. It's worth noting that the judge who granted this particular request, Hugo Norton-Taylor, well, his father is a former Guardian journalist who has written extensively on security and defence. Richard Norton-Taylor is known for his online campaigning against Israel, particularly in relation to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Now, there's an argument that Parliament should be making these decisions, not the courts. After all, we live in a democracy, do we not? Not some kind of unelected technocracy. The blunt reality is that we've allowed unlimited foreign aid spending while also allowing judges to override immigration policy and the wishes of the British people. Polling shows that 2/3 of people out there in a country want to see things like foreign aid reduced. They want to see things like immigration reduced, yet the government refuses to take action. Now, the US is starting to rethink its approach, so why isn't Britain? I think Britain has done its share. The UK has already taken in recent years, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Syria, Hong Kong, Ukraine. The Ukraine schemes alone have brought in over 200,000 people, one of the most generous responses in all of Europe. Britain has always provided sanctuary, and we should be proud of that. But at what point is enough enough? While Britain has a proud history of providing refuge, including to those Hong Kongers and Ukrainians, mass immigration today is completely out of control. It's stretching our resources, it's eroding our social cohesion, it's reducing social trust. Who are these people coming into our country? Many of those who are now seeking entry from places like Gaza will let me be controversial for a second, hold views that are deeply problematic in a Western democracy. Polling, for example, has shown that significant numbers of people in Gaza openly support Hamas and its extremist Islamist ideology. The UK must ask, are we importing people who share our values, or are we importing people who fundamentally reject them? People like Dana Abu Kama, a law student from Gaza studying in the UK, expressed pride and joy over the October 7th attacks at a pro-Palestine protest, leading to her visa being revoked by the Home Office. People like Heba al-Hayek, who claimed asylum in the UK, citing danger from Hamas due to her family's criticism of the group, was later photographed with two friends on a pro-Palestine march wearing images of paragliders after the attacks on October 7th. Despite this, one judge decided not to punish her, raising concerns about the effectiveness of the immigration system in preventing individuals who glorify Hamas from entering the UK. What worries me are studies like the one by the Arab World for Research and Development, which found that actually most Palestinians support the October 7th attacks. They have a positive view of Hamas and they believe that the West supports Israel due to, I quote, the Israeli lobby. A mindset linked to recent arrests in Greater Manchester over a plot to attack Jews, the police, and the British Army. Now, it's not just about values, it's also about economics too. If you look at, for example, studies from Denmark, they looked at 321 Palestinian refugees and they found that nearly two-thirds acquired criminal records when they settled in Denmark, and many of them became dependent on the welfare state. Is this really what Britain needs right now? As ever, let me know your views, gbnews.com/yoursaying, hit me up on X @GoodwinMJ. But I'm delighted to be joined tonight in the studio by Chairman of Migration Watch, Alt Mehmet, and my panel tonight, top panel columnist, former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Alt, how concerned should hard-working, tax-paying British people be about the possibility of more refugees arriving from Gaza?
I think they should be very concerned. This is lunacy, frankly, and the British taxpayer is going to end up paying for it all, as they have done for all the other liberalisation that has taken place with regard to the ECHR, which is nothing like the original document that was put together primarily by us. I think it's even more concerning, frankly, than at first meets the eye, because bear in mind that the people who are now able to come from Gaza, they applied overseas. Now, technically, you can't apply for asylum overseas. We're talking about millions of people, potentially, who could also apply in this way, and that's madness. You talk about 200,000 Ukrainians, 150,000 Hong Kongers, who incidentally, welcome as a lot of them are, that invitation is open-ended. Then there's the Syrians, there's the Iraqis, there's the Afghans, these various schemes. It's absurd, and all of it, as I said, is paid for by the British taxpayer who, as you've said, don't actually want it to happen.
So can I just ask a question for the people watching this show out there? So who made this decision? Because it certainly wasn't the British people and it wasn't their democratically elected government. It was a judge. So can you talk us through the extent to which actually people and taxpayers are having any influence at all over this decision? Because it seems to me as though a lot of this stuff that's being decided on immigration actually has no real connection to the people who are going to have to live with the consequences of these decisions.
Well, this was a second-tier tribunal judge.
Okay.
The first tribunal, where it's very difficult, actually, to get access to how they reach the decisions in the first-tier tribunal. This guy, Norton Taylor, I gather that the actual judgment was 15,000 words long. So it's hellish long, and it's all very difficult to access. It's all in legalese. But what he is effectively saying is, look, this is what the law says. This is what the ECHR says. These are these people's rights, irrespective of what the rights of the individual in this country is, or the rights of the taxpayer are. What he is saying is that ultimately the rights of the people who've applied override any potential concerns on costs or whatever that may apply at this end.
OK. Now, Aaron Bastani, Novara Media, I'm guessing you're more supportive of this than people out there who are thinking, more refugees, what on earth is going on? Why can't we actually control the borders?
No, I'm not supportive of it. I think in the case
think we should be accepting more refugees from Gaza?
No, I think in the case of Palestine, it's quite unique. You've got 2 million people in Gaza who want a country. It's not like Iraq, they have a country. It's not like Iran, they have a country. It's not like Afghanistan, they have a country. They want a country. There have been multiple instances of Israeli politicians overtly saying, we will send 1.8 million plus Gazans into Europe, we'll make it their problem. Those politicians, by the way, have broadly found support across the entire European political class. They have said, we will make this Europe's problem. Now, in the 19th century, this country had a foreign policy based upon the idea of balance of powers on the continent of Europe. It was in Britain's national interest. Today, in 2025, it is in our country's national interest to have peace and security and stability in West Asia. But instead, we've cheered this on. The war on terror, 40 million people displaced in 2 stupid wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Where did those people end up? Many of them went to Europe. And I'll finish with this. If these Gazans don't come to Europe, they'll probably go to Egypt. Population 116 million. Already you've got inflation above 30%. If that becomes a failed state, where do you think Egyptians are going to go? They're going to come to Europe. We need a political consensus around sensible foreign policy, minimising displaced people and getting on top of this problem.
Patrick O'Flynn?
Well, I think, there's 2 key points here. One is that the Gazans and the Palestinians on the West Bank several times could have had a state, a country, as you say, if they hadn't been the most disastrously led people on planet Earth, and every time their leaders rejected terms which aren't practicable anymore, right? So the Gazans, arguably, they had an embryonic country, but their actual government launched a mass murder pogrom on their stronger and better organised neighbour, and everything that has befallen Gaza. And we saw the celebrations in Gaza, on the Edgware Road in London,
saw them in the UK.
Right. Yeah. This was celebrated as some great victory. And
so that's now Europe's problem?
No, I don't think it should be Europe's problem.
So where do they go? Do these people die? What happens to them? 2 million people, where do they go?
Right, well, the 2 million Gazans, I think, they have to go back to Gaza at some point, right? I do believe that. We've seen Palestinian mass migrations into neighbouring countries, and they have destabilised every neighbouring country they've gone to in big numbers, including Egypt before, Jordan, Lebanon, absolute disaster. The local countries don't want them. And the second point I was going to make is that this is an immigration judge making up the law. Yeah. He is saying, yes, this was meant to be a law for a Ukrainian scheme, but because I can't find anything in the debate that says, oh, and by the way, it expressly isn't for Palestinians, therefore I'm deciding it can be for Palestinians. This is just the most astonishing judicial overreach. And the problem's not just the ECHR, it's that our immigration tribunals are packed with judges who all take the liberal no borders view.
So, 2 questions, if I can. The first is, lots of people watching the show will be saying, we've taken Hong Kongers, we've taken Ukrainians, we've taken people from Afghanistan. When is enough enough? Because I think many people watching this show will feel that the British sense of fairness, openness, tolerance is really being tested. When is enough enough? And the second thing is, how do we reform this legal system that Patrick is talking about, so we can actually ensure that it represents the values and the views of ordinary British people? Because this judicial overreach, it isn't only about the guy who was uncomfortable eating foreign chicken nuggets. It was also about, the woman from the Caribbean we read yesterday, who said she can't be deported back to the Caribbean because her Latvian husband would find it too hot and he doesn't like Caribbean food. I mean, it's absolutely obscene.
Well, perhaps she would find it too cold if they went to Latvia, but that's another issue. Look, our parliament is sovereign. We were told time and time again during the referendum debate and everything, our parliament is sovereign. Our parliament can override, can legislate in accordance with whatever our needs and our requirements are. Secondly, enough is enough. We've already reached that point, frankly. If we're now talking about fending for these people and, in fact, integrating them, then we've got to stop. We've got to stop and stop now.
Well, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you to my panel for that. We're going to hear a bit more from them in a second. Now, after the break, we're going to be turning to the economy and looking at whether Rachel Reeves's, or should I say Rachel from Accounts' career is on the line. The OBR today has slashed growth forecasts, wiping out her £9.9 billion of fiscal headroom. With her ironclad fiscal rules at risk, will she raise taxes, slash spending? What's next? Or will she be forced to resign? I'll be talking to a shadow minister shortly. See you in a couple of minutes.
Headliners on GB News 11 PM every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 PM and 5 AM as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually, if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimizing being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say 4 weeks before surgery, your 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, discussing the issue of Gaza refugees, let's get some of your views tonight. Andy says, of course, we've done enough. We are out of the European Union, so why abide by the madness that the ECHR has become? Cassandra says, due to immigration, the population is now bigger than France. France is about 2.3 times bigger than the UK. Jennifer says, judges are paid from the Treasury by taxpayers. They are too quick to make decisions that they don't pay for. Indeed. Now, keep them coming at gbnews.com/yoursay. Hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. Welcome back. Now, today, many are saying that Rachel Reeves's career is on the brink. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, has downgraded growth forecasts, wiping out her nearly £10 billion of fiscal headroom. Labour's £40 billion tax raid was meant to boost public spending, but instead borrowing costs have surged. GDP has shrunk by 0.1% and the economy is teetering on recession. With fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves called ironclad now at risk, she is facing an unenviable choice. Does she raise taxes again? Does she cut spending? Or does she admit failure and resign? With official figures showing that Britain's economy is now contracting and critics blaming her for the downturn, is Rachel Reeves's and her economic gospel well and truly on the rocks? Well, tonight I'm joined by Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Andrew Griffith MP, and my panel columnist and former MEP, Patrick O'Flynn, and co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Andrew, if I may, it's all unravelling for Rachel Reeves. How long has she got?
Well, you're right. I mean, chickens are coming home to roost, and it shouldn't be a surprise. She put these forecasts, these huge taxes on business, went on a spending spree on the public sector, giving train drivers unaffordable price rises. At the time of that budget, it feels a long time ago, doesn't it now? But at the time of the budget, the OBR downgraded the growth forecasts. That's come true. They raised unemployment. They said there'd be fewer people in work. And they also commented the fact that 9.9 billion, it's a lot of money, but 9.9 billion is not a lot of headroom.
Yeah.
And then since then, we've seen talk down the economy, confidence. Taxpayers are leaving the country thanks to Labour. So they are in a pickle, and the reason it matters is it's going to hit every single person in the country. Interest rates are going to be higher for longer. That will translate into higher prices in your weekly shop. Sadly, there will be more people unemployed than would have otherwise been the case. So she really does need to reverse course.
Yeah.
But the problem is, who's going to believe a Labour Chancellor is going to cut spending? We all know that there are huge opportunities for cuts in public spending, cut waste as they're doing in the United States, not give as much money to Ed Miliband for his mad energy schemes. But has she got the nerve to go through with that?
Now, in Labour's defence, they would say they're fixing the foundations of the economy and they're setting the stage for long-term growth.
Yeah, and you said that with a straight face, but, I mean, there's more evidence of the Loch Ness Monster than there is of this black hole. I mean, they inherited an economy. Yes, there was definitely more work to do, to be sure, but inflation had come down to the 2% level, and it was the fastest growing in the G7. I often say, look, that's not the only thing. There are other economies in the world that are growing faster even than the G7, but the economy was growing. It was on an uptick. And then she came in and, you know, they trash-talked the economy. You know, they made up this theory about a black hole. You know, that's not really what anyone who's looked at it, it's not what the OBR, when they were asked to report on it, found. There's always pressures on public spending. But you know what? You know, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, government is to make choices. I was a finance director for 15 years. You make choices, you balance the books, and they didn't do that.
Just briefly, if I can. So we have a low-growth economy, lots of debt, big state, low productivity, GDP per capita, arguably going backwards. We're probably already in recession. What is the path to growth?
Lower energy costs. You're just not going to be able to compete with a modern economy with the highest industrial energy costs in the modern world. Cut red tape, properly cut red tape, pare back lawyers. You know, too much judicial review, second guessing. You've been talking about that earlier on your show. But that's true of the planning system. It's true of regulations on business. And be on the side. Don't drive people away who are paying taxes, creating wealth, driving prosperity. Be on the side of entrepreneurs, small businesses, people who are trying to better themselves. Let them keep more of their own money.
Yeah. Aaron, Labour's not on the side of hard-working British taxpayers.
I wouldn't say they're not on their side. I think the big problem for Rachel Reeves and Labour is that they're not on the side of small and medium-sized businesses. And those are actually people they won over in significant numbers ahead of the last general election. I think there is a ton of bad news right now, and that's all before the national insurance hike in April. And I think a lot of small businesses are really going to hurt. We disagree on a load of stuff here. What we do agree on is that Britain is in an absolute pickle. 10% of government spending now is servicing our national debt. Debt to GDP is 100%, zero growth. I think, actually, where I do disagree with you, is I think we'll see a lot more interest rate cuts this year, precisely because the recession is actually going to be quite bad. There's a bunch of indicators where I think, for instance, headcount. This really struck me in December last year. We had the biggest cut to headcount if you take out the pandemic since 2009. And my jaw dropped. I thought something really bad is happening here. So I think you might see really big intervention from the BOE. I don't think we'll see quantitative easing or anything like that. But I think this is really bad.
Patrick, I'm starting to get really gloomy about the UK economy, but what is the way forward? What is the way out of this mess? I mean, Andrew's saying this is ultimately about you're getting rid of waste, cutting red tape, slashing energy costs.
Well, there's a huge piece of work to be done on public sector productivity, right? There were some figures out this week, I think.
Shock horror, working from home doesn't make the public sector more productive.
In the NHS, I think it's down 18%.
Wow.
And, excuse me, about half as much across the public sector. So that's very important.
Yeah.
I do think that Rachel Reeves talked the economy into recession as well, with her politically motivated determination to create this black hole, this idea of the public accounts being in a terrible state. And then when she delivered the budget, it was actually a tax and spend budget, right? And the tax element was zoned in on employment. It was a really terrible idea. So she is certainly very culpable for creating this. I do actually slightly disagree with Andrew. I think Labour will implement public spending cuts, right? And I think probably this guy, Morgan McSweeney, the alleged blue Labour guy on Keir Starmer's
chief of staff
shoulder, he'll be going for things like some of the things that you highlight on your brilliant Substack about some of the foreign aid spending, the DEI spending.
I didn't pay you to say that.
There are a lot of very unpopular spending programmes, and I think the government will have to start addressing them.
I mean, Andrew, how does this play out over the... People are anxious watching this show. How does this play out over the next 3-4 years? What's the route out of this for UK PLC?
Well, the route out is growth. It's the only route out. You can't actually even cut your way to growth. You've actually got to do both of those things, have less of the unproductive public spend, make more sensible decisions, but you've got to get the economy growing. And one thing that the government could do right now, because it's actually a cost headwind, is ditch this employment bill. They've got this trade union-inspired, trade union-written employment bill. It's fresh back to the 1970s. It'll be all those strikes, recolonising the private sector with trade unions. It's a real dead weight. One of the things we've got going for us still is our flexible labour market, and they could ditch that. That would actually save them some money in terms of the growth forecasts, and perhaps change confidence, change sentiment. So growth isn't just a word. God, they like using the word growth, don't they? But you'd actually start to do some things that gave people a bit more confidence again.
Well, let's see if that happens. Thank you to my panel. Thank you to Andrew Griffith for joining. Now, in a moment, as Nigel Farage's Reform UK surges again in the polls, Keir Starmer and the Labour government are scrambling to win back voters by apparently, get this, mimicking Reform's hardline stance on immigration. But is it too little, too late? We'll be discussing that in just a minute or two.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic coastline, but elsewhere it should be mostly settled. These heavy showers could produce quite a lot of rain, particularly across southern parts of Croatia, Albania and parts of Greece. Some thunder and lightning mixed in with those too. But as we move our way further west across the Mediterranean, it's largely dominated by high pressure, so largely settled, particularly for Madeira and Tenerife, where we're likely to see the best of the sunshine. Showers continuing for a time before becoming more settled.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hey evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We'll keep out a lot of cloud tomorrow, and if anything, for many of us feeling a little bit colder, but we should see maybe a few more sunny spells, particularly in parts of the west. We've still got easterly winds with high pressure out east, low pressure out west, and the UK kind of in this no man's land in between. The cloud thick enough for a little bit of drizzle here and there over parts of central and eastern England through the night, but most places staying dry. Clear skies across western Scotland will allow a frost here, and also some frost is likely over northwest England, maybe West Wales, where we do have also some breaks in the cloud. Temperatures elsewhere where it's cloudy, mostly holding up at 2 or 3 Celsius. Still quite breezy on some of these North Sea coasts, but the winds generally a little lighter than they have been through the day today. And as I mentioned, I'm a bit more optimistic for some brighter skies tomorrow. Again, parts of southwest England, West Wales, but even further east, it may brighten up at times. Quite cloudy again for northeast England, eastern Scotland, maybe a few breaks in the cloud for Northern Ireland. Certainly some good breaks in the cloud across western Scotland, so some sunny spells here again, but it does, of course, mean overnight we'll see that frost forming. So a chilly start as we go through the day. Not a great deal of change. Probably not as many light showers as today, but still the odd one here and there over the Midlands, eastern England. The winds will pick up in the southwest as we go through the day, as we'll start to see cloud thickening here. But generally, further east, the wind's a little lighter than today. But if anything, it's going to be colder. Temperatures only 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. We'll have a frost again, where we've got clear skies through Thursday night into Friday morning. Thicker cloud further west. Some drizzly rain at times for West Wales, Devon, Cornwall and Northern Ireland. Many eastern and central parts dry. But again, a better chance of some breaks in the clouds. Still on the chilly side, however, slowly turning a little milder as we head through into the weekend. Bye for now.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, as Nigel Farage's party surges in the national opinion polls, even overtaking both Labour and the Tories, Sir Keir Starmer's government is scrambling to win back voters. Labour is now mimicking Reform's hardline stance on immigration, even publicising dramatic raids on illegal workers, something they once condemned the Conservatives for. But critics, including veteran Labour leftist MP Diane Abbott and the Green Party's Caroline Lucas, warn that this apparently desperate pivot won't work, arguing that Labour cannot out-reform reform, especially on that issue of immigration. And that if Labour continue to do this, they will only end up legitimising Nigel Farage's message. In an act of what has been dubbed cringe and gaslighting, just look at this bizarre social media post, trying not to laugh by the Labour Party, of a fake iMessage discussion about Labour's plan for immigration. It is pretty cringy stuff saying, hey, guys, we are getting tough on migration. Now, with Labour MPs like Angela Rayner at risk of losing their seats, not just her, by the way, Yvette Cooper, Ed Miliband and others, can Keir Starmer stop the reform wave, or is Labour already too late? I'm joined to discuss that question tonight by my panel, columnist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Now, Patrick, this realignment of politics that we're living through, we've talked about it a lot, but if you look at the top 100 seats that are most receptive to reform, 64 being in Labour areas, looking at Wales, the Red Bull, North East, North West. I mean, is Keir Starmer going to neutralise that by talking tough on migration as he's been doing this week?
I don't think that's possible for him. I think if we investigate who is Sir Keir Starmer, as a young lawyer, I think he wrote a celebrated article where he claimed that an element of racism underpins all immigration control, right? And then he won the leadership of the Labour Party based on how he was going to fight to keep free movement with the EU, and that he was going to throw away powers to detain illegal immigrants. So his priors, if I use that term, are disastrous on this. And yet, comfortably in the run-up to the last election, he outflanked the Conservative Party on this core traditional Conservative issue because their record was so atrocious. Now, he's not going to be able to outflank reform, but just by changing the mood music, you know, the 19,000 deportations they go on about, it turns out only 5,000 of those were enforced deportations. Yeah. The others wanted to leave.
25,000 arrived on the small boats at the same time.
Absolutely. So I think most people who are well attuned to politics will cut through, if I can use the term, the BS very quickly. But a lot of people only engage in politics for a couple of minutes a week, and it's vague impressions, and so he might fool some of the people some of the time.
Aaron Bassani, is there anything the Labour Party you think can do to actually shut down this growing challenge from Farage?
On migration, no. I think their best bet would be to make other issues more salient and do well on those. That's not to say that migration doesn't matter and it won't harm them, but I think that's probably their best bet. Or they go the complete opposite direction and just, you say out Farage, literally do the things that Farage is saying in office. I would say this, I don't think Keir Starmer believes in anything, actually, so I wouldn't put that past him. On reform, you know, there's 2 YouGov polls now in 2 weeks that had reform ahead of Labour. More remarkable still was how Reform have now gone past 200,000 members. Labour are losing a member every 10 minutes. They're now 309,000 members. So Reform, and I never thought I would say this...
So Labour are 309,000 and Reform are
205,000.
205,000.
I never thought I'd say this sentence, but Reform could end up having more members than the Labour Party. And if that doesn't underscore the crisis of democratic legitimacy we have in this country right now...
I mean, is it a crisis or is it a rejuvenation of grassroots democracy? I mean, Patrick, I used to work in universities, and the old saying there was, you know, the era of mass party memberships is gone. We weren't supposed to have mass party memberships. We certainly weren't supposed to have insurgents being number one in the polls. There is something, you know, something is happening out there in the country.
It's quite remarkable. You know, Nigel Farage came back into frontline politics, perhaps just about 8 months ago. And, you know, the progress that Reform has made since then is staggering. And it's like someone is knocking away at the sort of timber foundations of our political system, and it's just riddled with dry rot. And everything else is just collapsing really fast. And I think the system people, the establishment people, still haven't thought ahead as to how far this movement can go in 4 years.
I mean, there is such exasperation out there, Aaron, that maybe Nigel Farage and Reform are benefiting from an anti-vote rather than a pro-vote. And by that, I mean, is Reform actually ready for government? Is this actually a competent, credible party that also can manage expectations?
That's the big problem. And I'm not being rude about Nigel Farage and Reform. I don't think they are. And I don't think anybody would be, frankly. You're doing a start-up party, and you've not gone from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. You've gone from 0 to going around the world several times. This would be entirely unprecedented in British politics if they were to be the largest party in the next election. And that really counts for something. What I'd also say is that Brexit and leaving the European Union meant that all the excuses that politicians used to rely upon, we can't change this because of Brussels, because of Strasbourg, that no longer works. It didn't work for the Tories, and it's now not working for Labour. And I'd say this, it won't work for Reform either if they're in office. Now, because of Brexit, whether or not you will remain or leave, you have to perform. There are no excuses.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch this revolt on the right continue to gather steam, I think that's for sure. It's a global phenomenon, so we'll be coming back to the panel shortly to discuss that and a couple of other issues. Now, President Trump has just announced that immediate negotiations are going to start taking place to end the war in Ukraine. Now, this comes as the president spoke to Vladimir Putin on the phone, stating that they both agreed that the millions of deaths as a result of the war in Ukraine must end. The pair also discussed the power of the dollar and bonded over how valiantly their two nations fought side by side against the German Nazis. So could we be approaching the end of the war in Ukraine? Let's quickly get the views of my panel. Patrick, we're near the end. Lots of people are about to breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, unless you think Ed Davey is more powerful than Donald Trump, and I should say Ed Davey in Prime Minister's Questions today, invited Keir Starmer to guarantee that Europe in general would provide Ukraine with all the military support and funding it could possibly need in order for it to basically win the war. And Keir Starmer quite cagily declined to do that. So the reality is the war effort from Ukraine depends on the United States, and Trump has made that contingent on them being open to a deal. It's just the terms of the deal that remain to be filled in.
So, Aaron, when do you think we're going to get this deal, and what do you think we're likely to see in it?
I think quite quickly, and I presume you'd see a cessation of operations. Russia would get most of the Donbass, keep Crimea. Also, as we've heard, no membership of NATO being tantalisingly offered over to Kyiv. What I'd also say is this, 2 years, more than 500,000 people have died, maybe many more than that. And for what? If you said 2 years ago, there needs to be some sort of negotiation. You'd be called all sorts of names. We're probably going to end up there anyway, and so many young people, particularly young men, didn't need to die. It's a tragedy.
But it's also, I guess, showing, again, Trump's newfound influence on the global stage. I mean, since he's come in, you're like a sort of rocket. He's just gone at everything. I mean, this is, you know, whether it's Middle East, Ukraine, we are seeing a guy that, you know, whether you like him or loathe him, he's getting things done.
He's also got to, and it's not just about age, he's probably only got one term, and you think you've got the midterms...
Well, he has only got one term.
Yeah, unless they change the law, right? He's got one term, and they've got midterms in, 20 months? And after that, the conversation will be who is his successor. So I think in terms of really trying to build a legacy, it makes sense to me anyway. It's very explicable that he's really just gone at this hell for leather.
Yeah. I mean, Patrick, we're hearing a lot about this is the end of the liberal world order, that sort of consensus that really dominated, I guess, after the Second World War through to the early 2020s is coming to an end. And it isn't only about the war in Ukraine, it's also about the issues around, you know, foreign aid and interventionism. And you've got this kind of, I guess, I don't want to say a US that's hell-bent on splendid isolation, but certainly a US that is more resistant to intervening in other parts of the world, right? It's just about getting things done, putting up tariffs, looking after American interests. I mean, this is bigger than Trump, right? This is the beginning of a sort of new model of geopolitics.
Completely. And you also have the American position on international trade from, you know, traditionally the party of free market capitalism. Donald Trump sees patriotism in economic activity levels. He doesn't buy all the traditional free trade purist arguments about international free trade always being a good thing. If it's hollowing out a key industry in a key sector of his country, then, you know, he will protect those industries. So there's a whole retuning, and it's based on the failure, I think, particularly in the last quarter of a century, of this global liberal overreach and the system that they thought was fantastic, the ruling caste, that hasn't delivered for ordinary people, particularly working class people in previously developed countries.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, Aaron, I mean, the model of liberal globalisation, I remember Tony Blair in 2005 saying, look, if you're not down with globalisation, essentially you're a closed-minded idiot. But the reality is, what we've seen is the working class across Western economies have been smashed by, you know, relentless global globalism, if you want to use that term, and Trump is the end byproduct of that. I mean, what Trump reflects is this sort of rejection among ordinary voters of this economic model that has consistently put global corporations ahead of ordinary, hard-working, tax-paying people.
Yeah, I mean, over the last 40 years, if you made your living through your hands as a man, you've had a really bad time, partly because of the work going out to Asia and elsewhere, partly because of automation. What's really interesting in the last 10 years, particularly in this country, is that it's not just manual labourers. You know, it's also people that sell their labour through cognitive work. Office workers have seen something similar. That, to me, is a whole new dynamic politically, and I don't know where that actually ends up 10 years from now.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch the debate unfold. Thank you to my panel. Now, in a moment, get this, Generation Z, the Zoomers, born after the mid-1990s, they're drinking less than any generation before them. What's the matter with them? 1 in 5 don't drink at all, and binge drinking is on the decline, despite them pushing for a new approach on drugs. What on earth's going on? We're going to be speaking to a member of that generation to tell us what is happening among the Zoomers. See you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along two very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess
and
is the one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady joining us this morning, and then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
talk to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
and they are very cute.
Look how well behaved they are as well. They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV and they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
Now they're both looking, aren't they? They know what's up on the
yawning already.
here. Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background?
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, you know, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are so laid back.
Yeah.
Easy.
That's
as long as they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, you know, they do get the sillies, of course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
they've all got different personalities, and it's just great to see. Even though some of them,
Dutch is just perched on the back of your head.
Dutch is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Dutch.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, discussing Labour versus Reform, the big political contest of our time. Let's hear some of your views. Debbie says he might as well talk to the wall because no one will listen to Keir Starmer. Pretty comprehensive. Thank you, Debbie. Richard says, I wonder if Labour will look into bringing proportional representation before the next general election. It may be their answer to stopping reform, annihilating the Labour Party. Interesting stuff. Keep them coming in. Join me on X at GoodwinMJ. Now, young people are rewriting the rule book on drinking, smoking and risk-taking. Get this. Can't believe it. A new survey reveals that Gen Z, the Zoomers, born after 1996, they're drinking less, much less than their parents. 1 in 5 are completely teetotal, and daily drinking is almost unheard of among Gen Z. Unlike millennials, a slightly older generation, I think technically I'm a geriatric millennial, having been born in 1981. Well, we embrace binge drinking. Gen Z, in contrast, sees alcohol as outdated, risky, and even unnecessary for socialising. But while they're steering clear of booze, their views on drug policy are shifting with growing support for decriminalisation. So what on earth is driving this change? Is it social media? Is it health awareness? Or is it a new approach to risk? Well, I am joined in the studio tonight by a member of Gen Z, commentator Luca Watson. Luca, just relax, surely. Gen Z, what's going on?
Well, I think a lot of this is a result of lockdown, is the fact that for a lot of our generation, that was the period in which usually we'd get used to going out, 18th birthday, you go to the pub for the first time, the club the first time, but a lot of us couldn't. We were told by law that we had to stay inside.
Luca, how old are you?
I'm 23, so I was 18 before the lockdown, so I got to go to the pub.
What year were you born?
2001.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. So, what's your earliest political memory out of interest?
Gosh.
What's the first thing you remember politically?
I think politically I remember watching the news when I was younger and seeing soldiers who'd been killed in Iraq or Afghanistan. Okay. That was, that stays with you, so that's what I remember.
Okay, so Gen Z basically more socially conservative, less, more health-oriented, well-being, sitting on Instagram, look at me and my six-pack, that kind of stuff. Is that fair to say? Is that what you're seeing among your mates?
I wouldn't say socially conservative. I don't think people are flocking back to the pews and there's any kind of revival there. Right. But definitely with the health stuff, people are very conscious. And like you say, part of it might be because you're on Instagram, you want to have the nice pics with the six-pack looking good. And so
I show my six-pack all the time on Instagram.
Of course. And do you drink?
Regularly.
Wow, that's impressive then.
I live in the UK, you've got to.
I know. But I think that's part of it, is that if you want to look really good all the time, drinking doesn't help.
Are you saying I don't look good?
No, of course you do, but not everyone is as blessed as you are, Matt.
So just talk me through this for 1 second, because here's why I'm confused. On the one hand, teetotal, or cutting down on alcohol. On the other hand, can we decriminalise drugs? What's going on there?
Well, I think in the poll, it showed that fewer people are doing drugs, young people are doing drugs, than 20 years ago. So the people wanting to decriminalise drugs, it's not because they're all doing the drugs.
Right.
But I think what's happened is that in our lifetime, drugs are basically being decriminalised anyway. Right. I mean, you go to most high streets, sometimes, I've seen it, people just shooting up in the street. So I think a lot of people have come to the conclusion, given that it's de facto decriminalised, why don't we just go the whole way and officially decriminalise things?
OK. And if I can ask, the other thing about that poll that struck me, made me a little bit depressed, actually, so many Gen Z, Zoomers from Gen Z saying, Britain is racist, I'm ashamed to be British, not really identifying with the country that's, raised them, given them all the support, education and so on. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think on the idea that around half, I think it was 48%, said they thought Britain was a racist country. That ought to be no surprise when we've been told our whole lives from the media, from our state education, from even art galleries and statues now, with the plaques saying that this is a racist person, it's not actually a national hero. So I think what we're seeing is a generation who's believing what we've been taught.
Right, OK. And do you feel as though, having gone through the education system fairly recently, I'll be very candid, ask you a very direct question. I didn't tee this up before we came on air. But do you feel like you were indoctrinated in the education system?
I think indoctrination is a strong word. I think essentially all education systems serve to give people a certain viewpoint. And I think the viewpoint that's being pushed at the moment is one that, yes, Britain is a racist country, that it's uniquely evil and so on. And so that's what a lot of us believe.
Well, the good news, Luca, is we'll be going out after this show and getting absolutely trolleyed so I can show you how a geriatric millennial gets down. Only joking. Well, listen, we're going to turn now to Patrick Christis. Patrick, what have you got coming on your show this evening?
Yeah, absolutely loads, Matt. So I've got the latest on a story that I broke yesterday, which is that several radical Islamic preachers are on their way to Britain. We think we might have managed to put a stop to some of that. Are immigration judges just open border fanatics in disguise? Robert Gemry is going to be live on my show talking about both of those topics. Kemi Badenoch, is she up to the job? There was another swing and a miss, really, at PMQs today, and I'm wondering what's really going on there. And Meghan Markle has been accused of showing up to the Invictus Games just to get social media clout and then swanning off. So all that and much more.
Wow, Meghan Markle, somebody that definitely needs to drink and relax. Thank you, Patrick. That's all coming up after the weather. I'll be back next week, right here, Wednesday. Christopher Hope will be here at 8 p.m. tomorrow. I'm Matt Goodwin. You have been watching State of the Nation, speaking up for the forgotten majority. See you soon.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We'll keep a lot of cloud tomorrow, and if anything, for many of us feeling a little bit colder, but we should see maybe a few more sunny spells, particularly in parts of the west. We've still got easterly winds with high pressure out east, low pressure out west, and the UK kind of in this no man's land in between. The cloud thick enough for a little bit of drizzle here and there over parts of central and eastern England through the night, but most places staying dry. Clear skies across western Scotland will allow a frost here, and also some frost is likely over northwest England, maybe West Wales, where we do have also some breaks in the cloud. Temperatures elsewhere where it's cloudy, mostly holding up at 2 or 3 Celsius. Still quite breezy on some of these North Sea coasts, but the winds generally a little lighter than they have been through the day today. And as I mentioned, I'm a bit more optimistic for some brighter skies tomorrow. Again, parts of southwest England, West Wales, but even further east, it may brighten up at times. Quite cloudy again for northeast England, eastern Scotland, maybe a few breaks in the cloud for Northern Ireland, and certainly some good breaks in the cloud across western Scotland. So some sunny spells here again, but it does of course mean overnight we'll see that frost forming. So a chilly start as we go through the day. Not a great deal of change, probably not as many light showers as today, but still the odd one here and there over the Midlands, eastern England. The winds will pick up in the southwest as we go through the day, as we'll start to see cloud thickening here. But generally, further east, the wind's a little lighter than today. But if anything, it's going to be colder. Temperatures only 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. We'll have a frost again, where we've got clear skies through Thursday night into Friday morning. Thicker cloud further west. Some drizzly rain at times for West Wales, Devon, Cornwall and Northern Ireland. Many eastern and central parts dry. But again, a better chance of some breaks in the clouds. Still on the chilly side, however, slowly turning a little milder as we head through into the weekend. Bye for now.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain isn't